Hi, everybody. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hi, nice. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice talking to you. It's a pleasure to have you to talk today. And I guess most of the audience might not know you very well, but you are basically a very experienced leader in the area of software development, worked in several different roles. I think you can give a good idea about your background.
Yeah, and maybe in a few words, I'm actually, I have been studying physics, so I'm a physicist originally. But at that time, there was no IT studies, so physics was the place to become a programmer afterwards. So many of my fellows and myself moved to the software industry, and as a physicist, and for the biggest part of my career, I've been with SAP. And actually, something between 25 and 30 years or so, so quite long. So I probably did not follow the common advice that you should change your employer often enough. Maybe I'm, of the old generation that stays with one employer for a while. And I think if there's one theme of my career in SAP, I've been, being global, actually in two ways. I've been global in the way that I worked in a team that was, or still is, responsible for making sure that SAP can run globally, meaning in all countries, in all languages, complying to all specific laws in a country. And I have been myself, moving quite a lot and, working for Brazil. Even before SAP, before being in SAP, I've done my studies partially abroad in France and in the US. And later with SAP, I've been living in India and in Brazil for quite some time. And that's, of course, how we know each other. And so, yeah, I think this was a nice touch that I could combine my job with the, which again was dealing with globalization, with also the experience to live in a global world, which is, of course, a very rich experience. Now, lately, actually, I've SAP was, was kind of nice to offer a kind of generous early retirement program, and I took this and last year. So I could follow my hobbies again. I could start some new hobbies actually. And I must say I do enjoy life maybe even more than than before.
Yes, I think when you work for a very long time in all these roles, it might be good to change the air a bit and do something different. Yeah, the software industry is really intense, I would say, and it
I
has
would say
changed a lot.
yeah, I agree. I think the work, and I think it's not only true for SAP, and all of you will agree, in software industry was pretty tiring, and I'm actually was very relieved that I could, take this break. Yeah.
Yes, and I knew you from Brazil when you worked there with the globalization team, but I saw one article from you in LinkedIn, and that's when I thought, oh, that would be very nice to have him here for a conversation talking about the software development industry. It was like an article, more like research style, and it was very interesting about how, maintenance can become a burden for software companies when they don't have any more time to invest in innovation if they are, let's say, drowning in old development. I think that's a quite interesting topic right now because we are seeing a world where companies have 20, 30-year systems and they are trying to innovate or evolve in this world and they still have all this background to be modified.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe two words on this. First of all, one of my hobbies that I'm now starting in is really mathematics, because before, in my pre SAP life, I loved mathematics and did several publications in this area, and yeah, it came back now with the time. I thought, well, this was really mathematics is cool, and then already when I worked, I had, of course, the experience that usually people in the software industry underestimate maintenance very much. Yeah, so you have management that distributes budgets for new development projects. That is very normal and understandable. But I must say, usually nobody really thinks of the maintenance, and corresponding budgets are not planned. And this usually leads, of course, to problems in quality, or to all sort of friction. And based on this, I thought there must be a more objective way, mathematically correct way to prove that so to give something leaders in the hand to plan this correspondingly, based on solid theory, and that was the effort here, to really make sure, and so that nobody can deny it, that yes, there has to be something planned in the aftermath of after development, because maintenance will be there for sure.
Yes, and I have seen that not only at SAP, but basically every, let's say, traditional software company suffers with that, and not only the software companies, but also the customers, because when they budget support as operational support, they also follow a similar approach, and they always think, okay, it will be less than what we need, and in the end, it's not quite the reality.
Of course, it's not only SAP. It is for sure every software industry, because it is very human. It is very human when you apply for budget, that you go to your management and say, hey, I have a cool development project. I can do something really innovative and new, and it will rock the market, and people will be, will love it. And then your management may say, yeah, I give you something. Yeah. But if you go to them and say, hey, I have to do some maintenance over some years, and it will not result in anything, but I have to do it, people will try to say, well, can we not, somehow work around it, or avoid it? So the general response to a cool, innovative development project, emotionally, and people, humans are emotional in the end. The emotional response to a development project would be great, something new and fancy. The natural emotional response to maintenance will be, oh, let's try to avoid it somehow. So that is of course true for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a classic say in the software industry. That talking about these kind of topics. Yeah, it's quite complicated, but let's say usually if you have not sold the product, it's not as bad as if you have sold it to only one customer, because then you have to do maintenance forever for just one company, and that's
Exactly.
simply not scalable.
Exactly. And of course, I must say, I must make a little bit advertisement for my long year employer. Actually, I think SAP is quite good, because they give this guarantee to the customers. They give the guarantee of maintenance. Only it has to be planned internally then, but for the customers, I think they are actually in a great situation, that they have a company here that guarantees that important part. And I'm not sure whether everybody is so rigorous in that, like SAP in fact is.
Yes, and usually, yeah, also the maintenance is extended sometimes. So even when the companies are not planning to use the software for so long, the maintenance is extended due to different reasons. So that's quite good. Yeah. Like now there is a big discussion about the move of ECC to S/4HANA, and companies, at least they are sure they can keep their ECCs for a longer, extended period of time. That is also good, because the market is really, let's say, warm right now, and companies are really having difficulties to find partners and consultants to do all the move that is needed for a big S/4HANA project. I have talked to many consulting companies, partners of SAP, and also customers, and there is a huge demand, crazy demand. If we talk about Europe right now, the recruiters, they are running 24/7 to find consultants. So having an extended maintenance is not bad in this case, because yeah, some people don't know when exactly they can do the project.
Yeah, and of course, and I'm not sure how much we want to talk about Brazil, but of course we all know that especially Brazil is a country where this is particularly challenging, with all the incredible fast and frequent changes of the law, and you have to adapt and readjust programs like every second. um, there are countries, of course, like Brazil especially, where this is even more of a challenge. Yeah, that is clear.
Yes, I usually talk about Brazil every day, and my main goal usually with my projects is to do rollouts and move companies from Europe to Brazil. So I know it's quite special topic. When we start the project and start the discussions with global IT, they are always surprised to learn what Brazil prepared for the companies and what the government is asking for. I shared today a post in LinkedIn because there was a lawyer in Brazil who collected all the legal regulations about taxation in Brazil. He compiled it in a book. And this book is 7.5 tons. It has 41,000 pages, and that is more or less from 2014. Maybe if he does that today, he would have 20 tons and 100,000 pages. So that's quite complicated to keep track of all these changes. It's not something humanly possible. I would say not, right now, not even technically possible, because most of these laws are still stored in paper in some city halls in the countryside. But that is the challenge. Yeah, that is a big thing. And when we think about software, then especially for these kind of local requirements, that was your area of specialization at SAP. That poses a big challenge, not only for ERP provider, but also for any kind of software provider to adapt to all these requirements. Not sure if you want to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, you have to tell me how much you want to talk about Brazil, but of course, we had internally at SAP, we had always a sort of a also a rating how complex a country is with respect to legal regulations and their changes. And we had something like European countries. We considered them as harmless, being something on a level of 1 was easy and 10 was very difficult. And European countries, like Germany or even more Scandinavian countries, very harmless, maybe on 2 or 3. So especially Scandinavian countries, very simple and on the legal side, which may be, by the way, a recipe for their success. Um, and yeah, even some Asian countries, again, maybe a recipe for the sex, quite simple, like Singapore. And then there were countries on the level of maybe 5 or 6. It's already complex in their regulation. Some Asian countries like India, of course, a bit more complex. US more complex than you would think, actually, because they have this, this state-dependent laws, which you only have in a few countries. And Latin America, most countries pretty complex, but then there was always only one country being on a full 10, which was Brazil. Yeah. Killing really, or stealing really your sleep, because it was something was happening all the time. Yeah.
Yes, I usually tell my customers that in Brazil you don't have earthquakes, hurricanes. We needed to invent something to worry about, and that was especially then the taxation.
Yeah.
That has to be a reason
Yeah.
for that.
Exactly. To counteract this. Yeah.
And I think that when we talk about this software industry, for example, we are talking about developments for a country specific, and you have a team of developers working globally, and you set KPIs for them regarding maintenance, regarding new software, new solutions. And I think that is also a challenge, because I saw one presentation you sent me about some advices that you give, and you say to not use KPIs. And
Yeah.
I would like to understand a bit more about that, and maybe you comment a bit, because I think I understand, but maybe you have a different view on this.
Yeah, when you're getting older, you experience some sort of behaviors, and I claim some wisdom after a while on seeing certain patterns in a company. Yeah, and as a result of this, lately, actually, in my last years, I put together some. I called it on purpose provocative advices, because I know they sound very provocative on a first glance, but if you think about this a bit more, or look at them from a certain angle, a certain perspective, then they make potentially sense to you. And one of them was, do not use KPIs. The other one was, do not develop. And I'll explain it a little bit later. Or another one was don't be too friendly. And again, these are all, of course, provocative advices. And the one on to come back on KPIs is a observation that I made, that KPIs very often actually, do not help the company at all. And I give you, of course, examples. Yeah? One example I had was when we were in the old times, when we were developing many years ago. So I think nobody can be, blamed now for that. There was a KPI in the very early times to create new screens, new user interfaces. Yeah? And there was a KPI for each development team, or a certain number of developers, to create as many screens as possible. And you probably can already guess what happened. All the teams created screens like hell, just to excel this KPI. But in the end, it didn't fit to the product. They were. I mean, I think all of them were thrown away, because they were simply not usable. But because you only had one KPI that people wanted to work against, create as many screens as possible. I had another lengthy discussion in my funny discussion in my career about another KPI, how to measure, development performance, which is, of course, very difficult, I know. And that's why I'm saying KPIs can be so difficult and useless. And I was sitting in a room where there was one fraction saying we should count development lines of code. Yeah. And the more lines of code a developer writes, the more he has performed. Yeah. And there was another group of people saying, no, the less lines of code he has performed, because then he has less maintenance and so on. We had this topic already, is better. Yeah. So it's of course a totally useless discussion, because you cannot measure the performance of developer by counting lines of code. But that's how far it goes if you want to absolutely apply KPIs. And that's what I'm trying to warn against. Now, I know there are areas where KPIs, of course, make sense. And I think especially in areas where you can measure very well, and you have not too many dimensions, like in sales. So I think in sales, of course, sales numbers are a legitimate KPI. But even here, people complain when salespeople only, look at quarters and not look a little bit at the strategy. We have those discussions. You have to sell also, futuristic products. Sell also cloud products, not only easygoing current mainstream products. So there is, of course, a discussion that you have to have probably more than one KPI. It's not only the quarterly, revenue, but probably also something that measures the long-term sales or whatever, or long-term ambitions. But it's possible. But in development, I really doubt good KPIs are very easy to achieve.
No, I totally agree. Usually, it tends to happen what exactly as you describe. If you give them like a game where they have to score this, they will game the system. They will work just to achieve the number. It doesn't mean that you generate any value anywhere. That's actually very, very normal, and I see that happening. And even in sales, like you said, if you have just one KPI, for example, you have a certain product that gives a higher profit in the end of the year, that they will game the system to sell only that one. Doesn't matter the strategy, because that one will generate a big bonus. These kind of things, it's always complicated to deal
And I've
with.
seen this. I mean, again, SAP is actually still doing good because there's a reasonable management. But I think I've seen other companies also where people have to create as many services as possible, as many classes as possible, as many, and anything of those KPIs do not make sense, because it's not really creating quality or creating something that is really useful in the market, because it's difficult to find a good measure for that.
Yes, and then I think that it already links to the second topic you mentioned, that is not to develop software. Actually,
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like Dieter Ham's statement, because he had one about design where he said that good design is as small design as possible. I think it goes in the more or less the same way, no?
It was actually my first manager at SAP who told me literally, the best program is no program, because it creates no maintenance and no, if you have any upgrades later on, you don't have to adapt it again. It's simply the best. And I think it's very relevant because many of us, and I include myself, who come from university and know a lot about programming, love to program. It's fun, it's great. And when you are young and you're really knowledgeable, you want to program. You want to show what you can. You want to create fancy features and functions. So that is very understandable. Again, very human. But what I have seen is very often things that you want to deliver to a customer are already there. So again, from my career, when I started, I also, I loved programming. I started, do my first programs when my manager told me, hey, there are similar things already that SAP has developed. So do me a favor and look first what is already available. And sometimes there are libraries, sometimes you have to ask around, but that was always possible in SAP to ask around, and you always got helpful advice. And yes, in many cases, I realized there is already similar functionality available. And maybe I have to embed it in something or extend it or call it or, whatever, you leverage in one or the other way, but it will not make me, coding nothing, but it will probably reduce my coding effort by a considerable percentage. And that is something that I wanted to, give with this provocative advice to before people develop. And it's exactly what you say, before they design, they should include in their design reusable parts that usually are already there. And of course, then it's much easier because if you use something reusable, you don't have to do yourself. It is already proven. It is quality. That of course facilitates your life and the life of others very much.
Yes, that's interesting when we think about developments. But sometimes what I see is that really the developer is in a bad position because he doesn't understand, for example, the context of a certain product.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
in the project, it's quite normal. Sometimes as a consultant, we talk to the customer and we redefine the process. So instead of needing an enhancement or a new development, no, they work around outside the system with people to get a different result from the system, already using what is there. But sometimes the developer doesn't have this knowledge and he's not well protected in a team with somebody that can talk to the customer and get this kind of different process, different idea. That's why I see sometimes the developer is in a difficult position to make these choices. He knows the code, he can reuse code, but sometimes there could be even a better solution involved with a product owner or a product manager outside the development team.
Yeah, especially, and you're absolutely right, and especially since the very skill and the asset of this developer is developing. Yeah, so he will try to apply his best asset, which is coding. So it's very understandable again. But yeah, it would be great if there would be this conscious look around to see whether there's something else.
Yes, and I think now it's a bit different because when I started, software development was when I started not too long ago. Software development was still a purely waterfall method, and now we have let's say different teams. The structure changed a bit. I'm not sure if you think it was a good improvement or not. I like some of the functionalities or some of the ideas of the agile movement, and to be honest, it's tomorrow is the anniversary of the Agile Manifesto. It's from 11th of February in I think it's 2001.
Yeah, yeah. The organization, I'm not sure. I think it's probably it doesn't make it better or worse. I would think. Yeah. Because it all depends in the end. I think not so much on the structure, but on the right people and their their consciousness and education level. But what I was putting some hope, and maybe that's idealistic and not true, but I was putting some naive hope in actually in the modern programming languages, because I thought something like an object oriented language would be more suitable to reuse. I thought there must be more modules that can be reused than in the old sort of not object oriented languages. I was hoping this, but I might be wrong.
Uh, Still talking about reusable software, we do have one question about it. Uh, uh, what would be the ideal reusable solution, and how you would measure this success? That's an interesting question, I guess.
Yeah, ideal
What is
reusable
the
is, of course, hard to answer. Would be, of course, a software that can be reused by many people under many circumstances in many applications. The measure of success, there's literature about this. I was trying to read a little bit. Yes, you can try to measure, of course, software simply by how often it is used by others. And this might not be actually a bad criteria, because it forces you to think about the universe and not only about your program. It forces you to think about the environment around you and other stakeholders. And that's, I think personally, a very healthy thought. Everything that and that's also not. I want to go too far. That is the success of all those Apples and Amazons, that they always think about the network. They think about the global environment and the platforms. And I think if you manage to make your software reusable, you think in the same terms. You think about networks. You think about platforms, and that is for sure, or I believe, the right way. Yeah.
That's an interesting point of view, because we are in the world, and now things are more and more interconnected, because we used to do, like, if you are a backend developer, you develop backend. You don't need to or worry about the environment you are working, or how the integrations work. Like, you work in a very small module, and you had this lots of small modules side by side. And now, if we do development, for example, online for these web interfaces, you have hundreds of different things that are variables. You have different OSs, you have different databases, hundreds of thousands of APIs. So things are much more interconnected. I think that if you have to develop or redevelop everything, it's really complicated when you do not have a reusable software that can be put in a container and taken to whatever operating system or whatever cloud system that you want to use. That makes things almost impossible, because you have hundreds of thousands of variations for every scenario.
But I think that's not so far from reality. If I think about my last year's SAP, where we were very heavy engaged, and I know, Renan, you are as well, in something like electronic invoicing. It was based on the idea to have one central concept of an electronic invoice that can be used, first of all, in many countries, but also across many applications, be it part of an S4HANA or an Ariba system. So this is, I think, not too far from reality, to have such a concept where you have a reusable piece like this one, an electronic invoice, and you use it across applications and countries and regions.
Interesting thoughts. And yeah, one of your other comments was about not working on your improvement areas.
Yeah,
Was
and that's one of my favorites, because, and that's something I also learned, that of course every time, and again it sounds of course provocative, but every time I mean, you have some review and people say, yeah, these are your strengths and these are your challenging areas. Then tentatively or naturally, you and your interviewer or rep partner, you think about to make those minus points plus points, which sounds very natural. And I realized, but it's not. I must say, this is also literature. You find this. That's actually not the best way to do. Because without going too deep, it is clear that we are not equal. and humans are different, and some people have naturally strong points and naturally weaker points. Let's call it weaker points. And now you can, of course, try to improve your weaker points, but it costs very much energy. It is because it doesn't come natural to you. It really absorbs a lot of your energy. Whereas when you work on your strength, it's very easy. When you work consciously on your strength, it comes with you. It's an easy effort, and you become even the leverage much higher. You become even much better. So if you look at the efficiency, you're much more efficient working on your strengths because it comes natural and will happen, and you don't have to think about this all the time. Only work a little bit on it. Whereas working on your improvement areas is tough and usually not very sustainable, because usually you fall back into natural patterns that are part for you. Now, of course, there are areas where you have to do what we call damage control. So with your weaknesses should not be that bad that you really create catastrophes. So, example, when I was a developer, I certainly had a weakness area which was quality. So I think I was doing good developments, but they were, I here and there I slipped, some quality standards, which was not my cup of tea, simply. And it's still true till today, I would say, that quality is not my most important thing. Doesn't come too natural. But of course, I realized I cannot get it too bad. So you have to at least work on yourself that you meet certain standards, but you should not do much more, honestly. You should rather, to repeat myself, use your energy to use that leverage and increase your strengths, because here the change will be much more dramatic. So that is my advice. Do damage control for your weaknesses, but especially work on your strengths.
Yes, I like this concept. I don't remember which book I read something similar, but I have seen already something similar to that. And I would like to ask if you think it applies. You talked more about people, but do you think also applies to organizations, that companies should focus on their strength areas and just do damage control on certain topics?
Good thought. I think in theory that's probably also true, but it's of course very difficult to work in an organization consciously on something for a while. But I think you are actually right. At least not forget your strengths. That's very important.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. We do have another question still about the reusable solution, but this one is also a bit more polemic because it also mentions the other biggest topic, cost and licenses,
Yeah,
and how to deal with that, and how much open source could be used for reusable success. That's
that's a good question. Honestly, I have not, especially open source, and I know this is being debated, of course, on all levels, and I cannot give an answer. I have not thought about this deep enough. There are pros and cons, clearly. Tentatively, I see more risks with open source, but personally, I have not a clear opinion. Yeah.
Yes, I'm not also no expert in this open source area, but I did some studies and it's quite fascinating some of the things, because if we see like the internet infrastructure, it's basically 80% running on open source systems. Everything that we are doing is running on Unix, Linux somewhere. It's very interesting. And also about these new technologies that are emerging, like with blockchain, it's basically an open source technology
Yeah.
and it's taken over finance and other areas really fast. I
But honestly, maybe I'm too old-fashioned for that, and next generation will have to. I am, however, saying this, taking the chance. I am of ever a strong friend of common developments with your ecosystem, with partners. So I'm, and that maybe just to look at this reuse thought from another angle. Again, I do believe you do not have to develop everything yourself, but also, work together with partners. So extend your search for already existing programs, not only to your own, company potentially, but also to partners. I'm a deep fan and believer in a good ecosystem. So yeah, so this certainly would be something that I would recommend to work together on programming also with partners. Yeah.
Yes, I do recommend. If you are looking for partners here, I can recommend very good one in Germany. No, talking seriously right now. No, I think that is something that I didn't have this dimension or this knowledge before. I left SAP that the partners are really key for success in implementation anywhere in the world, because SAP has really not the capability or the amount of people enough to implement this software in all these companies that already bought it. And the development of the partner ecosystem is something that I see as a fundamental, not only for SAP, but in the software industry in general. Because right now, companies that don't have a good partner ecosystem, it's quite difficult to have scale. You cannot hire more people in IT departments or in IT sectors. You need to have partners to do things. Otherwise, you cannot scale any business.
Yeah, of course, this has been traditionally an extremely strong point for SAP and still is, and that's very good. So
Another topic, we talked about KPIs, software improvement areas, and we have another one that is especially difficult for Brazilians or for Latin America, I would
yeah,
guess.
I don't. Yeah, I was saying also and of course I know it's easier for some cultures and more difficult for other cultures. And another provocative advice was to be not too friendly to your coworkers. Yeah. And Renan, you're absolutely right. I have seen this especially in Brazil. And just a word on Brazil again, because it really, it was really an experience to work there. I've always thought the Brazilians are the best team workers, because they form so great teams and are helpful to each other and support each other. They are fantastic teams, and kudos to this teamwork, this team spirit they have, which I think is not met anywhere else. But like everything, it has a downside. Like everything in life, every good thing has also, again, a downside, which is improvement. Unfortunately, personal improvement, unfortunately, usually only happens when people tell you something, some honest feedback, be it positive or be it negative. And honest feedback is not so easy as it sounds now, because usually you do not talk about yourself. I'm not saying usually to people, I think you could do I don't know, your English is not good enough, and your presentation could be better if your English was better. I think as a manager, you might do this, or you do this, but as a coworker, usually you shy away, right? You don't do this because you want to be a good friend and a good colleague. And yeah, this leads sometimes to the fact that we, in my view, do not give enough feedback to each other. I am a strong fan of feedback, of honest feedback. Of course, it is not easy, but I believe if you do it with the right spirit and the right tone and the right setting, so that the other person realize you really do this for him or for her, you really do this to help the other person and for nothing else. There's no personal agenda, there's nothing. It is really to help the other person, then it can be communicated. And it's perceived sometimes as not being nice. That's why I gave this provocative advice. But the actual advice is try to be to give more often feedback, to improve yourself within colleagues and friends, even in private life. I would say this is absolutely helpful.
Yeah, I think that from my Brazilian experience, I think that we can give honest feedback, but it requires lots of intimacy. Because if we
Yeah,
are close friends, sometimes at work, I can tell my colleague, "No, that was really bad. Man, that was really bad. You cannot do that again." But if you are not that close, then people really get defensive. They think, "No, ignore this guy doesn't know what he's talking about." So that is really complicated area. And one thing about Brazil or Latin American culture that I thought was impressive, when I worked in India and in the Philippines, I thought that people there, they are quite Latin American as well, because they
yeah,
also tend to be super friendly, super nice, very talkative, very communicative, but they don't like so much also as Brazilians negative feedback or saying no. That
yeah.
is my impression.
You have this famous lose your face thing, which is there in Latin America, which is of course there in Asia, which is not, and so it's easier for me all to say that, which is not so much there in European, especially North European countries like Germany, Netherlands, Scandinavia. So of course it's easier for me to recommend this than maybe for others. Yeah.
Okay, and so not being nice to your colleagues might be something and might work out also in the leadership role. I think it's quite interesting, and you have to also to think about, because sometimes when you are the manager, then it gets even more complicated. When you
Yeah.
are just a coworker, okay, might not be perceived bad, but talking to a manager sometimes can be quite difficult.
What I've also seen, and this is again now specifically for Brazil, and again, just the feedback that you may take or not, yeah. In contrast to Asian countries, what I've also seen in Brazil, that again, they are fantastic team players, but sometimes there is not many people that really show through, yeah, that really, stand up and make an impression. That's so usually you have like in a Scrum team of 10, you have 10 great people working together as a team, but I wouldn't say never, but you less frequently than in European or Asian countries in this matter, you see somebody really standing up and selling himself a little bit also. Yeah, which I think is very, very nice, honestly, on a personal side. I think people are modest. They are people that don't, want to shine, and which is a very nice attitude. I like it a lot. But sometimes in their career, it could also be helpful. And this is, I think, a bit, from my experience, typical in at least in Brazil. Yeah. They may be too nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you are right on this topic, and I see it a lot. I saw it a lot in several companies that I worked, and we always had these, yeah, very nice people that don't stand up, don't criticize anything during a meeting. Later on, they try to work around and talk to people outside to say, "Oh, maybe that should have been different," or yeah, I see that. That is,
But
I think, also true.
But I want to not take anything back from my statement that they're as a team. I think
Uh,
they're unbeatable. Yeah, they're really fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, but especially in these times of social media, I think we are needing more people like that, because
Mm.
currently I see too many people showing off.
I have one more provocative advice, which is actually my favorite one. Yeah, and which is also, I think, on the first glance only provocative, which is to not listen to your customers. Yeah. And which, of course, again, you are told in lean, of course, listen to your customers, do design thinking and all that. But there's also risk, and maybe that's what I want to point out with provocative advice, that there are also risks with everything. And the risk is here, is known as in literature as the innovator's dilemma. Yeah? So when you're always listen to your customers, you do not some innovative, you know, jump. You don't do this extra leap that is needed for true innovation. The famous examples, of course, the carriages in old time with the horses. and they became better and nicer and a bit faster and more beautiful and whatever. But it was purely based on what the users of those carriages were saying. Yeah? And it needed somebody thinking beyond to come up with cars. And it was not by listening to the existing users or customers. And that is not totally true what I'm saying, because what I in a more deeper way want to say, you have to listen to your customers, but you have to truly understand what they want. So in this example, customers wanted to move from point A to point B, and they wanted to move in a comfortable way, not becoming wet and fast. And then you have to think about what is the best way. And this is exactly how innovation happens. You have to understand what your your customers want, but you have to understand it in a more abstract way and think about general solutions of what they really want. Easier said than done, of course, as always. But I think this is a challenge for all of us in the software industry, because you have, especially, and that is the innovator's dilemma. The more customers you have, the more wishes you have to satisfy on your current products, and the more difficult it gets to go back, to sit back and think, what do they really want? Do they really want that my performance becomes better of my program, or that I add another function, or do they actually want something deeper? And that's, I think, maybe the most important advice for the software industry. Try always to look behind what customers really want.
Yeah, I think that is interesting, and I have some examples also from the consulting area, because sometimes the customers, they approach us and they say, "No, I need an MM consultant to do this." But then, if you just put the consultant there, you don't really know what is the problem. Sometimes you talk to the customer and you understand, no, but they don't need an MM consultant. They need somebody else, or they need to discuss the process, or they bring their process owner to the discussion and do something. It's not simply, I want this, and that is what will solve my problem. And I think that is the kind of statement that you want to make, that, okay, yes, I need to understand the customer deeply to be able to give him a solution. Because if I just hear what he says, he might not be the best part, the best decision. There are things that usually are not so easy to find. And I see this kind of questions sometimes. The customers, they want very specific things. And when we discussed it a bit down, okay, no, it's not exactly what you needed. You need something different. And sometimes even the customer is not let's say, the most skilled person to find what kind of solution they need for that specific problem. They are not sometimes the expert in a certain technology or area. And I think that's quite normal in our IT industry.
Or I think about the founders of SAP. The customers at that time sure didn't say, I want a program that, does all the credits and debits automatically and does they said, well, I have problems, with all my books, and can I have this more simpler, or so more structured? So they were looking for the actual need of the customers. Again, easier said than done, of course.
Yes, yes. Especially, I think, in the consulting area, because sometimes we receive the RFP already closed, so they already decided
Yeah,
everything
of course.
without checking with any partner or with any consulting company what would be the best solution. So they decided everything, and they
I
just
think
said,
for consulting it's even more difficult because, of course, because they have already clear ideas what they want. Yeah, that's even more difficult, of course. Yeah, I understand this.
Okay, but basically we covered a lot of ground already. We had lots of discussions with the 5 topics you mentioned, these provocative ideas, and we are coming almost to the end. So I would like to ask if you have any other advice that you would give to consultants or partners. I know that most of my audience, they are not directly the customer of the software, in the sense they are not buying it, but they are usually implementing and selling it. And what happens today, most of the consulting partners, they are becoming software companies. That is a challenge for companies. In the past, they usually get a template, they design some Excel files, they implement, configure the system. But right now, everybody is doing some kind of development, has products, is working with cloud platforms to integrate solutions. And that is quite a change for our consulting industry. If you have any advice as a leader in the software development area for many years, what
Yeah, I
would
think
companies do in this sense?
I think I have two advices, but they are not of a big surprise probably. But I still think they are very true. And and I think I have experienced this in SAP, and for me, SAP is such a great company because they have always managed to move people into two directions and allow two things with people, which is the key, I think, for a successful IT company or project. And the one is, of course, and again, that is no surprise, is knowledge. So you have to stay hungry and learn and learn and learn. So you have to understand your thing. So it's not an industry where talking alone will help. It's an industry where you have to understand your topic. You have to be, if you're a programmer, you have to be on the latest state of the art. If you are a consultant, you have to understand the application, or if you're an application, you have to understand the application very well and always look for more and surrounding or neighboring applications. So you have to really constantly be hungry for knowledge and understanding. That's especially important in the IT industry. And the second thing, again, a strong point in SAP certainly is, and some people maybe underestimate this one, is a network. You have to have a great network. And this, like knowledge, doesn't come alone. You have to do some considerable conscious effort. So you have to talk to people. You have to, of course, even more difficult in these times, but have physical contact as often. Go to lunch, go have a coffee with somebody, meet somebody. But if not possible, talk to them, write to them, making friends or at least know people. This is always an incredible help for many situations you are in. Be it in a situation, and I had this myself with a customer where you do not know the answer, but you go back and call this person and ask him for advice, and he will help you, or she will help you. Or, of course, for your career, or for certain, areas, even again in your private life where you're not so sure about what decision to take, for some coaching. A good network is as important as good knowledge, and not as easy as you think, because you have to work for it consciously. Again, it doesn't come alone.
Yes, that is especially true. Yeah, and yeah, networking is quite an activity in itself. I think that nowadays, with at least we have very good tools where we can get to know people even with do not sit physically together. I am really big fan of LinkedIn. I'm always spending at least 20, 30 minutes every day to check some updates and talk to more people. And there is really wonderful people out there doing lots of
Exactly,
different
because
interesting things.
that is maybe the surprising thing. They are wonderful people. Most people are really helpful. Yeah, even I've talked to people from even competitors who are helpful. Yeah, it is most people are helpful and want to be helpful, but still you have to do something for it. Yeah.
Sure. It's not something just asking a favor when you need, but you also have to give
Exactly.
something back. Okay,
Exactly.
then I would like to thank you for this 1 hour. It has gone by really fast. We
Yeah,
talked a lot of different
I
things,
agree.
and thank you for all the hints and ideas. I'm pretty sure I will take some of them to discuss with my colleagues sometimes in our coffees. And if you have any additional remark or general remark you want to make, feel
No,
free.
Renan, thank you very much for this chance. It was very interesting to talk to you and to the audience. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.